Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hyperconscious Podcast. Alan, what is hyperconscious?
Once you understand why something is the way that it is, now you have the power to change it. Great conversations with great people and great questions are the keys to the kingdom of unlocking your consciousness.
Every single action that you do starts as a thought. When you control the way you think, you will control the way you act, and you will control the way you live. That is hyperconscious. Geographically? Geographically. This is cool. So I would say make sure that pretty face is showing.
Yes, true.
They're going to want to see that thing. They're going to want to see that thing, Alan. That face. You good? Ready? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of the Hyperconscious Podcast. We have a guest today. She is a coach. She is the host of the Princess and the Bee podcast, and she is also a badass mompreneur. That is a very interesting name. We are sitting down with the one and only Kimberly Spencer. How are you doing today, Sunshine?
I am doing extraordinary and sparkly and definitely sunshiny.
That's awesome. See, I knew that would resonate with you. I should have thought of sparkly. I think now I'm looking back on it, but that's okay.
Go forward.
So we're lucky enough, Al and I are lucky enough to be involved in a mastermind with you, and for the listeners, Summer Scalero, she was on, I don't remember what episode it was because I'm terrible at that, but we've been learning so much from you, and it's interesting sitting down and talking to somebody that we actually know, because for the most part, we don't know the guests we have on until we sit down and, build rapport with them and learn about them and go deep with them. When it comes to masterminds, can you explain to the listeners why they're so important, what they are, and what you hope to accomplish when you're on a mastermind call?
Mm-hmm. Well, you are most like the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I like to tell my clients and anyone, it's not necessarily just the people that you're friends with or that you may consider your best friends. Like I have some very, very close, long time friends that I've been friends with for 25 years since I was like in kindergarten. And I don't spend a lot of time with them. But you are most like the 5 people you hang out with the most. And that can also be the podcast you listen to, the news you watch. If you watch the news, that can be any sort of person that you're spending your time with because you're absorbing that energy. And masterminds, when you connect with next level thinkers, people who are of a growth mindset, who are constantly developing themselves, who are constantly striving toward excellence and mastery, it pushes you even further to go to that next level yourself. Because a lot of times, especially when you're just starting out as an entrepreneur, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but it can be a little lonely.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, so it can be a little lonely. And unfortunately, my husband is an entrepreneur as well, so he gets it. But a lot of times, especially now in the digital age, it's like you and your computer. And if you have a team, like I have a couple members of my team, but they're on their computers as well. It's not like we're all meeting in a hub somewhere. So gathering the energy of a mastermind is essential to growth. I'm a part of 2, the podcast mastermind, and then also one that I'm in as well with Summer, and that we've just been creating and growing and being really specific and intentional with the masterminds that we are choosing to be a part of.
So I said that you were a coach and a badass mompreneur. So for those who don't know, what kind of coaching do you do, and what is a badass mompreneur? Tell us a little bit about you.
Awesome. Yeah, happy to. So the type of coaching that I do is high performance coaching. I started out as a coach doing like body image and women's wellness because I did go through a 10-year battle with an eating disorder, and I recovered with no psychological or medical intervention. And that was something that was such a profound experience for me, and that I ended up through, back then I was teaching Pilates, and it was toward the end of my experience, like toward the end of my eating disorder, and right in the beginning phases, in the beginning years of teaching Pilates, that I found this necessity for congruence, because there I was still kind of, doing laxatives on the side, or like throwing up my food from time to time when I had just started teaching Pilates, and I found myself feeling like such a hypocrite. And it was through teaching and starting to be really authentic and owning my story of what my own body image issues and my own things and food fears that I was struggling with, that I started to attract like massive amounts of clients that made me realize I wasn't alone with my own stuff. Because sometimes when we're in the stuff, we feel like we're the only ones going through it. And that's the biggest lie that the ego can tell you. And B, that I was in a position to serve and lead and challenge. And so, and challenging is kind of my superpower as a coach, because I do it in a loving, cheerleading way where I see somebody's excellence. I see their goals that they want to achieve, and I'm able to see how they're either sabotaging or delaying or doubting themselves in some way, and we make those shifts of degrees of perfection in order to get them to that next place, that next level where they want to be, whether it's with their body or with their relationships. So I started out doing body image and wellness coaching, and I didn't really have a system or anything. That I just kind of knew what worked for me, and I was looking for some form of a system. And it was right when I decided to really turn pro with my business, which was right after I found out that I was pregnant. And I literally was on the phone with a coaching company, the Tad James Company, who certifies in NLP, hypnosis, timeline therapy. And I was literally on the phone on the sales call with my now coach, and she was like, well, she was the first person or two that I told that I was pregnant, because I wasn't sure of, really taking that next step. And once I found out I was pregnant, I was like, yeah, I'm 100% in to take my coaching to the next level. And so I went pregnant to this coaching course. I got certified in NLP, timeline therapy, hypnosis, and the mindset shifts that I was able to bring to my clients were massive. I started having clients hit their first $10,000 months after they worked with me. They had the courage to leave their marriages. They started to find their purpose and have a lot more clarity. And I was like, oh, okay, I think with this mindset thing, I'm onto something. But it still wasn't feeling like I still wanted more. I was hungry for more. And that's when I found Brandon Bouchard's certified high performance curriculum. And that was something that seemed like a really interesting piece to add in to allow for even greater progress with my clients. And so I had that. And then I also got certified in the bank sales methodology, which has been transformative for my own marriage with my husband, in just understanding his process. And what that process teaches is why somebody buys. Because a lot of times in traditional sales, we're taught like sales techniques of like, here's all these communication things that you can do. But rather, when you understand it from the customer's perspective, you eliminate being ignorant and arrogant, and you're able to speak in the customer's language. And we're all making buying decisions every day. Whether it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a purchase of a coaching program or a purchase of like a car, but you're trying to sell, quote unquote, to your child to eat broccoli instead of crackers.
Exactly. And you need to speak their language. Yeah.
Exactly. And being able to speak their language, it creates respect for the other person. And it's one of the big things that I teach is the law of requisite variety, which is the person with the most behavioral flexibility will be the one that in essence wins the day. So the more tools you have in your toolbox, and that's just what I was doing on as a part of my coaching journey was just gathering all these tools. And I still will be, I'm still gathering tools. I'm signed up for like 2 certifications this year, at least, to just continue improving and working toward that level of mastery that really means a lot to me. And high performance, it was the perfect amalgamation of the body stuff. Cause you need your body, especially as an entrepreneur, and the mindset and I apply it mostly toward my clients who are female entrepreneurs. And I've had such a love for business that's kind of my niche that I target.
Kim, there's so many questions, and I usually say this when you're so next level, and we get the privilege of hearing how next level you are, but also I always say it's the silence between the notes that makes the music. So this is the music, but it's what you're doing off air that makes this value come out. So I want to bring that to the listeners first and foremost, and also every call we have on a mastermind. Absolutely. There's always some new thing that you're doing or pursuing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Kevin basically says every time we get on a call with you, his brain hurts.
Yeah. I always feel, I think this is a good barometer of a mastermind or of the people that you hang out with. I always feel like I'm not doing enough when I get off the phone with you. And I don't mean that in any bad way. I think that's good for me because that's how I get motivated. But I just wanted to add that so the listeners would understand.
And so I also wanted to ask you a question because I think there's so much that I can learn from you and also that our listeners can learn from you. So when you're trying to serve someone, as a coach, mine is fitness, but it's also very mindset and peak performance oriented as well, and my clients can attest to that. But when I'm trying to serve someone, I think the amount that I can serve them is predicated on how much I understand them and what they want and what they need and the way that they process information. So sometimes I need to be more strong and other times I need to be more warm. How do you personally balance strength versus warmth with each individual circumstance? Like, how do you know when to come on strong as a coach versus when to be more empathetic and warm?
There are a couple ways that I do that. One is I trust my intuition. When you're in the session of with when I'm in my sessions with my clients, like it's a very intimate experience, and there's a whole process that I do prior to really prepare me to receive the information that I'm getting based off of their tonality of their voice, based off of their language that they're using, based off of their facial expression and their eye patterns and how those moves. And that's something that teaching for 10 years people's bodies with Pilates, that it heightened my awareness for my sensory acuity. So I see the tiny muscle twitches that people make in their face when they're about to have a breakthrough. And that's when my gut says, push there, just like it did in Pilates, where I would see like somebody was like not quite to that point of like where they could do definitely 5 more. That's kind of what I do now with the mindset, or when I see those physical movements, those infinitesimal physical movements within my clients of like, oh, that's like, now that's where you kind of got to push and challenge a little bit. And I always, and two, the other part that I listen to is their language. I am obsessed with language. I started out years ago, I was working in Hollywood as a screenwriter. And so I love the written word. I love the words that we use and the words that we choose because they do define our reality.
Love that.
So when you're on your coaching calls, just out of curiosity, are you on some sort of, so you can see their face?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I do all my calls via Zoom. I used to do in-person coaching, and I don't do that as much anymore just because I like to travel and I like my personal space.
Exactly. There's digital, what is it? Digital, automated, recurring, evergreen, and scalable. Yeah. So...
so I just chose to, when I had my son, like that's why I closed my Pilates studio, was even though I was doing wellness coaching out of there, I didn't want to be location bound anymore. And I also didn't want to drive to any place where I'd really have to be away from him.
So Kim, Alan had to convince me from the very beginning to start doing mastermind calls with people because I'm very new to the entrepreneurial game. I've only been doing this for a year and a half full time, and before I had a very, very fixed mindset. So I understand how difficult and how intimidating it can be to get into rooms with people who are better than you. One of the greatest things I ever did was go to HPA Live, where I was lucky enough to meet Summer, and Summer met. It was a whole thing. So
I had to convince him of that too.
he had to convince me of that.
Just so you know.
So just for the listeners, I want you to know I'm not some sort of superhero who just does things that scare him. I need a little coaxing. Now, Kim, for the listeners who might be in the same position I'm in, what advice would you give them to help them get out of their comfort zones, to help them get in rooms with people better than them, to go to networking events, whatever is going to get them to the next, step of their journey? What advice do you have for them?
Oh God, like Kevin, you're not alone because I used to have that same sort of fixed mindset. I used to have, and I still work on this on a daily basis, of a pretty healthy ego that it definitely was a disservice in other business ventures. And that was a thing of, as to why I really stopped myself from going into Crown Yourself. So a little bit about my backstory. I've been an entrepreneur for 10 years. Now I've taught Pilates. I was a freelance writer. I did, and I was the president of an e-commerce startup. And it was in that business that I was really, like, my entrepreneurial muscle was really, really stretched there. Cause like Pilates was never supposed to be the main thing. And so, yes, I had a small private studio, and yes, I had like consistent clients, but it was never something I like really marketed, because it was never really supposed to be the main thing.
Right.
And so while I was doing, while I still had my studio, I was pursuing this e-commerce business. And it was in that I learned so many lessons just with marketing and publicity and all of that, but also about the mindset of an entrepreneur is very different than someone who grows up in a traditional education system. And for me, I didn't go to college, and I didn't find myself I was a very, very good student in school, but I never found myself to thrive in a traditional educational environment. And how I know that is because when I was 15, I got mono in my sophomore year of high school. I missed like 6 months of school, and I had the highest GPA I'd ever had all year. And
man.
I just learned that it's because I was such a self-starter and such a self-learner, but being confined into like classrooms and lines and things like that, it just, didn't allow me the freedom that I thrive on. And so that is a part of the entrepreneurial mindset. A lot of people get in because of the desire for that freedom, but a lot of our traditional programming has programmed us differently. So in this startup, I was partnered with someone who was significantly older than me, totally different generation. And while the dynamic worked for a while, after a while, there was just certain things about our partnership that weren't really jiving. And 3 months before I was supposed to get married, I found out that my partner had wanted to buy me out, and our investors wanted to buy me out. And I was like, oh crap. So the whole summer that I was supposed to be preparing for a wedding, and like, I was so like finding napkins and table settings, I was negotiating with lawyers and learning about contracts and like legal jargon and things like that. And it was not a super fun or sexy summer because my hair started falling out from stress. Like it was not a pretty picture. And I was bought out 3 weeks before I got married. And when I got married, I then on my honeymoon was like, oh my God, what the fuck am I going to do? I really like, and I can curse on this, right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
you're
okay.
fine.
Yeah, you're good. We're explicit.
Okay, cool. Because I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? Because I was literally like, okay, well, I've had on my Pilates studio. I really prefer the mindset around the body and stuff like that. I was like, well, relationships. Now I've found my forever husband, and like, he's amazing. And okay, I think I got that figured out. And I was like, the business, I've had 2 businesses, and like, they've both done very well for, being startups and, owning a studio. And I was like, okay, I think I got that too. But I came up with the idea for Crown Yourself on my honeymoon, and I got so chicken shit from the idea of doing this thing again, of going into a business again, because I really, after that summer, I felt very traumatized by all the stuff that all the lawyers and things like that. I wouldn't wish legal trouble on anybody.
Right.
And it was, I was really scared to take action. And it was in that time, like I'd been into personal development with like reading books and taking courses, but I never really like the mindset around business. It just kind of had come naturally to me because I grew up with two entrepreneur parents. And that story is definitely fascinating because while they are entrepreneurial, my dad was an addict my whole life until about 3 years ago. And so they grew a multi-million-dollar company with him being incapacitated majority of the time.
Wow.
Which is unbelievable. And so I was raised with this very entrepreneurial spirit, and I started to realize that I thought differently from other people, just in that from people who were employees or people who were in jobs or people who followed that traditional path. And I started diving into that. And that was when I started dipping my toes into like, okay, let's see what this like coaching thing is for real. And like, let's see like what this coaching thing is all about. And when I got a coach, oh my God, like my world changed. I was just like, oh, wow. To have someone there who calls you out on your weaknesses, who holds you to your goals, who challenges you on your beliefs that are holding you back. Like that was when my world just like opened up and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is like, I've been telling myself that story for that long. And I was really glad that I found that coach, because I was about to give birth to my son. And I knew like the 2 years that I was totally chicken shit in my business, I had a nice website and lovely photographs, but like it literally was making no money. And
Oh yeah.
so it was not sexy. I was working a job and as to supplement my income from my Pilates studio as well. And I was just like, complaining every day. I was in this like total fixed mindset of like, why me, and living in this past story of blah, blah, blah. And like, it just, I look back on those years and I see how far I've come in just the past like 3 years alone, of just what a limiting belief or a story around some shitty experience that you went through can do for stymieing your entire growth and your progress and your ability and the destiny that you have within you, and the destiny that you have within your heart and your soul of the things that you want to accomplish. And if you're living by this past shitty story, like, damn. So the first thing, in a very long roundabout answer to your question.
No, I love it. I'm ready to knock down a fucking wall right now.
The first thing is really examine the stories that you're telling yourself, because I've been through like most people see me, and when people hear from my high school, learn of how insecure and how scared and like how literally bulimic I was during my high school years, they're like, oh my God, I had no idea that you were struggling with all of this stuff. And so the things that I look for when I'm hearing anyone's story is where they're blaming.
Yep.
Because when you look for blame in any way, and sometimes that can even be blaming yourself too much. Because you do have to forgive yourself, because I do believe that in any sort of scenario, anything that you've been through, you did the best you could with the resources you have available. That's why hindsight is so 20/20, because you're looking back with the knowledge that you have now. You didn't have that 5, 10, 15 years ago, even 6 months ago.
Even 6 days ago.
Even 6 days ago, ideally, if you're really on a path to mastery and growth and development, like and the timeline speeds up. That's the amazing thing, is like the timeline speeds up once you start. The first the first bits of personal development, you're improving by leaps and bounds by just like stepping out of your comfort zone and going to an event. Because it's those things, like it's like when a golfer picks up a club for the first time. Like they're not miraculously Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods pre, shake-up.
right. Pre
They're not
the
miraculously pre the
incident
whole
or
like
17
self-sabotage.
Right.
But the first time you pick up a club and you swing, you improve 100% because you didn't have that knowledge before. You didn't have that awareness. You didn't have that skill set. And then as you get to that next level of mastery, it's the tinier shifts and tweaks and things that you do and the mental processes that you go through that are going to take you to the next level and the next and the next. I mean, there's a big, big difference between those who are in the 3%. If you look at like athletes, and I don't really follow that many sports, but I love sports as a metaphor, because when you look at the top 3% of people in their field, maybe collegiate athletes or semi-pro athletes, like it's a 3% shift to being in the 1%. But that's like while the timeline is shortened from the amount of improvement, it's like the degrees of perfection that you got to keep tweaking and keep working on.
It's mastery is such a. I actually am reading by Robert Greene the book Mastery. If you haven't picked that up yet, Kim, it's truly unbelievable, and it goes into the evolutionary science of how our brain is wired for mastery. But one thing that really I want to bring to the listeners. Like, you mentioned that everything is sales, even if it's just persuading someone to click this podcast to listen to it or to, sell an idea. For you, you're kind of selling the idea of mastery, personal development. I guess my life changed also. I wrote down here, it said, you basically just said, when I got a coach, my whole world changed. I am seeing that happen with my clients, and I've seen that happen with me, and Kevin is seeing that happen with his clients. And so whether it's mentors or coaches, I think it's absolutely critical for us to put away what you referred to as your healthy ego and start to get in rooms with people that are way ahead of you. I'm privileged enough to be coached bi-weekly by my Aunt Joanne, who founded the first financial firm in New York City founded by a woman. They actually co-founded it. And she is leagues ahead of me in networking, sales, personal development, business development. And I'm telling you, every time I get on that call, I get hammered with like all of the things that are holding me back, and it's changing my life every single week. And then I bring it to Kevin, and then Kevin and I bring it to the listeners.
Kevin gets overwhelmed and cries.
Exactly. So how do we, I guess what I'm really asking of you right now is, can you please sell the hell out of coaching and mentors to our listeners? Because if you're out there right now and you're listening and you don't have people that are leaps and bounds ahead of you in arenas that you want to master, you are leaving money on the table, you're leaving happiness on the table, you're leaving impact on the table, you're leaving so much growth and potential on the table.
Well, it depends on what your listeners' bank code is.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well played.
But
Well played.
just to speak in like all codes and all languages, like with finding a mentor or finding a coach that has achieved some sort of goal that you aspire to achieve, you will, by working with them, they have a specific system and strategy that they have put into place that got them to that level of success. When you find that person that has certain things that you want, it could be maybe they're like a badass mompreneur and they're like crushing it with a toddler, or maybe they are, really into fitness and they've got their body on point. You're not going to go to an overweight fitness coach for your health needs. But so often we go to our friends who are single for relationship advice or for dating advice. And so often we go to the wrong people who have not achieved a certain level that we want to achieve. Like one of my clients, she was taking a lot of advice from her mother. And I love my mom. Like, I love my mom. She's a kick-ass entrepreneur. She's still 70 and still going for it. And I take entrepreneur advice from her because she's an entrepreneur. But with my client, her mom has been an employee for 70 years. Or not for 70 years, but for 50 years. And for 50 years. And so she was getting all this advice on like business and on business about from the wrong person, from somebody who's never done it. And so with having a coach or a mentor, they guide you because they've already been in your shoes where you are. And if you want to run faster to your destination, that's when you get a coach. That's when you get a mentor. That's when you get somebody that can guide you who has been where you are. And the thing is with masterminds, now, sometimes there can be coaches in masterminds or mentors in masterminds. Masterminds is kind of everybody is working toward that same overall goal. So, for example, like the podcast mastermind that we're all in.
Yes.
We are all working
Woo!
toward a goal. Woohoo, dream team.
Right.
We are all working toward a goal of having ranking podcasts and some of the best podcasts in the world. We're
Right.
totally
Ever.
in the history of ever, and totally in loving competition with each other. Even
Exactly.
though I don't believe in competition, but we're all lovingly challenging each other to rise to that next level, that we're all going toward that same point. So like we're all climbing the pyramid to get to the top. The same is true with like the mastermind that I have with Summer. It's for mompreneurs or aspiring mompreneurs who desire to have kids and have a lifetime partner, or whether that's a marriage or just a life partner situation. And they want to have multi-million-dollar businesses. And they're already making a certain amount of income in their business now, and they don't have a side hustle that they have to have. Like, so we put these parameters because we wanted to all be working toward this one goal of being able to have it all, have the body, have the children, have the husband, for me, or life partner, have the multi-million-dollar business. That's what we're all working toward. And so that with having that mastermind, you're all climbing toward that same point. With the difference between that and having a coach or having a mentor is that coach has already achieved some sort of thing, and that coach ideally also knows and has a skill set to unlock certain things within you. Because the coaching mentorship, yes, the mentors normally achieve something that you have not yet achieved, that you aspire to achieve. Coaches, you can have someone who's a high performance coach, but they have to practice what they're preaching. So like for me, I strive to have peak performance every single day of my life, so that when I lay my head on that pillow, I'm like, I did everything I could today that brought me so much joy. I got to spend time with my son. I got to have a date night with my husband. We had a sexy makeout session. I also worked out. I also worked my body. I also went for it in my business, whether that's really promoting my podcast hard, which is what I'm doing right now, or whether that's coaching a client today. I strive for that level of performance in my life and in my business. And so with that, like, the coach doesn't necessarily have to be where you they just have to know how to work with you, and also that they're practicing what they preach.
I am thoroughly enjoying this podcast thus far, Kim. I want you to know that. And
Thank
I also,
you.
of
I
course,
told you guys, I set the intention. Best podcast ever.
I know you're killing it right now.
Really are blowing us away.
I just
This
had
is
a little bit of a
phenomenal.
breakthrough, and during every podcast, there's always a point where I switch up, and I'm about to do it. I switch up from, okay, everything is hunky-dory, you're the greatest ever, like, you're killing it, because I feel like if I was listening, I would kind of be intimidated by you by this point, because you have so much going on, and you're so confident, and you're so eloquent with your words, and you know what to say, and your explanations are next level. So I think when it comes to a polished product, you are very polished, and you have a great way of showing that. Is there anything that you're dealing with right now in your life or struggling with that me or Alan or somebody listening to this podcast might be dealing with at the same time?
Oh God, like every day. Like, polished, yes. But it's also like this level of confidence. This is worked at after years and years of trial and error. And like for me right now, I mean, we are just dealing with raising a toddler business and a toddler baby.
At the same time. Yep.
At the same time. And let me tell you, that shit ain't easy.
I can imagine.
Like,
I can only imagine.
And I have to say, like, recently, my husband and I made a very, very life transforming decision. We were living in this beautiful apartment in like near downtown Los Angeles in Koreatown. And we were like 30 minutes away from my family. And we were very isolated in that space. And I just, as I saw my son Declan growing, I was like, he's needing more attention. He's needing more time. And I was floundering. Like I was really working hard to stay on my routine and stay on my game. And it just felt so complicated and hard that my husband and I made a very, very big, drastic decision to allow us to get some of our finances in control so that we can buy our house next year, and to allow us to have that support. Because I just, like, as supportive as my husband is, he's also growing a business too. And so it was like, it was kind of either he or I had Declan, and we were trying to balance that and the time that it would take and how to do that all. And so we made a big drastic decision to move in temporarily with my parents. And that transition has been a huge, huge transition. It's also been one of the best things because, like, this morning, like, my son was crying. He's a little sick, and he got me a little a little punky. And we just had a rough night last night, and he was up every hour going bippy bippy, and I was just like, I am so done. Like, I just could not be needed at that moment. And I woke up and I was able to walk into my parents' office. My mom was there. She's like, "Oh, you want me to take him?" I was like, "Yes, please." And I went and she took him downstairs to have breakfast, and I was able to go take a bath and like set myself up and prepare for this interview, prepare for my clients today. And it was the biggest luxury for me to just have that level of support. And it's also allowed me to come back to the place that there was a lot of pain growing up. Like, my parents have never moved since they bought their house. They've just expanded their house. And every time I've moved out of my parents' home, it has been from a place of anger and pain and fear, because my dad was on something. Right. And when I moved in with my husband Spike, it was right after my dad had a big painkiller explosion from just not like, it was just a very, very messy thing. And Spike and I had just gotten engaged, and I wasn't planning on moving in with him until we were married. But then I was like, I've got a ring on my finger now, and my dad's acting like wacky, and I really don't want to be around that energy. And I moved in with my husband. But again, it was another time where I was just like, okay, done with you. Fuck you. Bye. And so I'm really, really happy, because this time in my life has actually provided me to have the space to heal those old wounds and those pains that came from it. And initially, I will admit, there was a bit of like shame or fear of like, the not feeling like I was enough to be able, like, oh, I should be Superwoman. I should totally be able to raise a business and a baby and do it with no nanny and do it on my own. Like, I am woman, hear me roar. And I was just like, I had to remedy again that ego. And I also had to deal with any sort of shame of like, or of people's perceptions, or what I would think that they would feel if, oh my gosh, well, you're my high performance coach and you're doing so well, and yet you're living with your parents. Like, what the fuck? And I was like, once I healed those, though, and those perceptions, I had to heal those within myself. And like, no one has cared.
Right. Because it's who you are that matters.
Because it's who I am.
Right.
And I'm like, it's not about whether I have a house now or I don't or whatever. It was like, this was just a choice that my husband and I made, that we made a very smart business investment so that we can take the money that we were spending on our place and put that towards savings. Because two entrepreneurs, you got to put 20% down for a house in California, which is crazy.
Right.
Which is crazy pants. So we just decided we would make that smart business investment and also get built-in babysitters.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you were enjoying this episode where Alan and I were lucky enough to interview Kimberly Spencer. If you're listening to this, there's a chance that maybe you don't feel good enough, or maybe you feel stuck, and maybe you're thinking, Kevin, how would you know? Well, for 28 years, I felt the same exact way. I was suicidal. I was depressed. I was anxious, and I had no hope for a brighter future. Lucky for me, I had people around me who wanted to see me do better, and they knew that I was capable of that. If I didn't have those people around me, I don't know where I would be. My goal now is to help you. My purpose in life now is to make sure that nobody has to feel the way that I felt.
Guys and girls, I'm fired up right now, and I want to tell you that you are capable of so much more than you are currently demonstrating. How do I know that? Because unless you have a ton of mentors and a ton of coaches like I do, you're like me at one point. When I didn't have those things, I thought I could do it all on my own. That was one of the biggest mistakes I have ever made in my life. And Kevin will help you on your journey because he's been to the darkest places and climbed out, and it's been amazing to see his transformation.
I appreciate that. If you reach out to me at NeverQuitKid on Instagram, we will take care of you.
Think we should get back in the episode?
I think we should.
Talk soon.
Bye. There you go. I appreciate you being vulnerable because I think that, like you said, you're a performance coach. So especially in your mind, probably in your mind more than other people's, you have to be the best ever all the time, or what value can I add to your life? And I think that we're all human. We all have things going on in our lives, and sometimes you have to do something that's uncomfortable or it doesn't look golden from the outside because it's what's necessary at the time. So I appreciate you sharing that for sure.
Oh, 100%. And it's been amazing because we actually helped my parents' marriage. Like, they've been married for almost 50 years this year.
Oh my goodness.
And through a lot of shit. Like, they went through a lot of shit. And we did some of we used some of our coaching tools and some of the personality tests. We literally sat them down on a Sunday and had them go through all the tests so we could really understand them, like I do with my clients and like my husband does with his clients. And suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, it makes so much sense. Here's why you do this. Here's how you do this. And it was just one of the things of teaching them the 5 love languages. And like my dad, suddenly, like, we learned his love language was physical touch, and my mom has been giving him so much more hugs, and like he's now coming home with this giant smile on his face and feeling so loved. I'm so excited to leave my childhood home from a place of strength and love and support, and I see him changing, and our relationship that has been very complicated over the past 31 years. Like, it's at the best that I've ever had it. And it's awesome to be able to have that. It's like getting to know my dad again, which is something that, I didn't know who my dad was growing up. Like, I had 4 dads, like I say. Like, I had the really cool, loving dad that I got to see from time to time, like the guy I am living with now, who's really awesome and fun, and who acts like a dad, and he's got an amazing money mindset, and he's got an amazing entrepreneurial drive, and that's like where I realized where I got a lot of my really, really good habits from is from when I had those moments as a child when I got to see my dad in that light. Now, I also had 3 other versions of my dad. One was the alcoholic, abusive asshole. And that one, thank God, is dead and gone. My dad has been sober for 3 years since I staged his intervention in 2016.
You staged the intervention?
I did.
My goodness, you have so much courage. Anyways, keep going. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That was one of the scariest things that I'd ever done. We can touch on that for a second because my dad came home. I was over at the house, and I was living at home with my husband. It was before my son was born. And I was like, I came over because I thought, like, my mom thought he was having a stroke. And I was like, something's off. And he was just weeping, and he was like, couldn't feel his arms and legs. I was like, oh my God. And I drove him to the hospital, and it was at the hospital that I was on the phone with my cranial sacral therapist, who also treats my dad. And she's like, Kim, I just want to let you know, have the doctor test him for alcohol. I was like, what? We're going through this thing again? Really? And I did. And it turned out that he was 3 times over the legal limit. And that was 6 hours after he had driven home.
Wow.
So, yeah. So that was my breaking point. And I was like, I'm done. And I walked out of the hospital, and I put together, within a week or two, I put together a bunch of his family, friends, and I found rehabilitation centers, and none of them believed that. They all were like, oh, well, your father, he has to be employed. I was like, he runs a multi-million-dollar company. So, and they were like, they who were in the professional field of recovery had never heard of anyone being able to do what he's done. So, I mean, he really is an amazing man. He has one of the most generous hearts on the planet. And so I put together this intervention out of love, but also out of necessity, because I was not going to tolerate that anymore. And my husband spoke, and I spoke, and I do believe that it was in that 6-month period where we separated so that he could have his time to recover. That was in the time I love the universal law, the vacuum law of prosperity, the universal law where, the universe abhors a vacuum. And so I made the space by separating myself permanently from my father. I didn't know how long it would be. And I said, you know what, you got to fix you, and I'm going to go do me. And it was in that time that I made the space in my life to start my own family. And that's when I got pregnant.
Can you please go a little deeper on the vacuum? Because I'm not sure I understand the concept, and I think that's probably valuable.
Yeah, so it's one of my favorite laws. I just found out about it like 6 months ago.
I think I've heard you say it on the mastermind, but I think I was hammering you with a bunch of other questions of things I was
interrupting you just over and over.
Right.
So one of the laws of the universe is the vacuum law. And if you look at anything in nature abhors a vacuum. So if, for example, you're walking on the beach and you're leaving footprints in the sand, well, the ocean is going to come in and fill those footprints up eventually with water, and then eventually with more sand as the tide comes in. The same is true for anything in your life. And when I look back on my life and all of my experiences, I'm like, oh my gosh, so often I can directly correlate me removing a person from my life, or removing a business from my life, or removing something from my life. And then suddenly I now have the space for something new and beautiful to flow in. That's why I totally am grateful for my first business with the e-commerce business, because when I had that, when that left, it made this glorious space for my sole purpose business, which is Crown Yourself, that I came up with on my honeymoon. Now, it took me 2 years to act on it, but but once I did, I went all freaking in. The same is true for my relationship with my dad. When I allowed that to leave, I had the space to create my own family, because I'd created that vacuum from having any association with my dad at all for like 6 months.
So Kim, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm very, very fascinated right now. I'm curious as to how you gauge when it's time to allow, close one door, others open. How do you know when to close it?
Well, sometimes it's closed for you.
Right, yeah. But sometimes we have to have the courage to close it ourselves, right? So
exactly.
How do you know when?
For me, it's boundaries. It's I mean, you get what Tony Robbins says, you get what you tolerate. And for me, I had a friendship before I got married that I was not being treated in the way that I want to be treated in a friendship. and I allowed for that person to leave my life permanently. And then it allowed for this amazing new friendship that I have with one of my husband's best friends to flow in to that space. She even stepped up and took that bridesmaid's spot in my wedding, because, and she was just so supportive. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was something that I allowed in, something better, because I stood up for my boundaries of what I would and would not tolerate.
I think one of the great barometers that I try to use, and I want to bring this to the listener while it's coming up, and maybe to you as well, Kim, if it no longer inspires you, I think it's probably time to close the door. That's kind of the only real barometer that I've been able to, like, if it inspires you to be a better human being, it's probably good for you. If it no longer does, I think it might be time to move on. Again, there's no hard stop answer to this. Everyone's got to feel it out for themselves. But I think that law is very fascinating. Thank you for bringing that to the listeners and to me. I've never heard that before.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's one of my favorite ones because, and I love what you said about inspiration, though sometimes I do think that can be sometimes fleeting, because it's like, for example, when you look up, it's that inspiration, but it's that inspired action, and it's that constant seeking the action, because we can all be inspired by a motivational quote on Instagram, but whether we take action on that thing or not is very different than just having that inspiration. And that's why for me, when I feel like something is no longer, that it's time for something to leave, like last year, I had a group coaching program that I absolutely loved. I loved the women in it, but there was just something where A, I was no longer feeling inspired, and B, I was feeling like my boundaries as a coach had kind of dropped, where I knew these women, some of the women who were in the group, the group was not enough for what they needed for the amount of breakthrough. And that I felt in a way that by having that, by still having that space for them, it was enabling them. And so I closed the group in order for them to really make that leap or make that investment or shift or have some aha moment in their life. And all of them did, which was fabulous. But I trusted my gut and my intuition that was the right boundary to set for me as a coach and for them as far as what they needed for their progress.
Kim, in the preamble, we talked a little bit about self-worth, and I always say that, and maybe I have a hardcore stance on it, but you don't get what you want, you get what you deserve. Like, what you work for, you will get, right? We did an episode recently on self-love, and I think that self-love, self-worth, all of those things go hand in hand. Can you go into what self-worth means to you, and how do you know whether or not you actually deserve what you're getting?
Oh, one of my favorite topics, because actually this was a massive breakthrough. I know HPA, the High Performance Academy that we were all at. Well, I didn't meet you guys at the academy. I think for all of us, it had its profound breakthroughs.
Absolutely.
And for me, I was able to have an incredibly profound breakthrough around the concept of deserving. And it's like my heart is pounding right now, because it was so palpable for me, because many people, like, as our friend Summer calls me, she calls me the queen of ownership, right?
Yep.
And I'm all about taking ownership for your actions and ownership for your results in life.
You had to give it to Kevin one time for sure.
Oh, yeah.
It was hilarious. It's like, can I challenge you? Kevin's like, yeah.
If you must.
But I won't put anyone through a challenge that I won't put myself through. And one of the things was, when I was at HPA, I was able to provide a gentleman with a really, really powerful breakthrough around some abuse that he had suffered. And I was able to kind of coach him through that process, because I've dealt with a lot of people who have been abused sexually, because I was. And that was something that really, really hit me at HPA. I remember waking up and I had this vivid like dream, but you know, it was one of those dreams where you think that you are awake, and it was actually a dream that was a memory. And the amazing thing about our glorious unconscious minds is that it will repress a memory, something that's traumatic for you, until you're ready to resolve it. And it was in that moment that I realized that there was a person who I had been making excuses for. This person was no longer in my life. I haven't seen or spoken to him in ages and ages. But I had this revelation of this experience that happened, and I'd made excuses around this experience of essentially being raped. And I use that term very, very carefully because I really value language, as you know. And I wanted to make sure that if I used a word that's as severe, like that to me is a very, very serious word. And I had never really said that had been something that had happened to me. And it was before I met my husband. And because I never wanted to put myself in that space of feeling like I was a victim. And I never wanted to put myself, but I just had this experience that I couldn't define it. And I was looking for the word. And when I actually Googled lying in bed at 3 a.m. in the morning, the definition of rape, and I was like, oh my God, I had this experience that technically is considered rape. And it was something that I had never really remedied. And so I didn't go to the morning session that morning. I just kind of sat with it. And my mom was there with me at HPA. And I told her about the experience with this guy. And she was like, oh my gosh, like, and she even, it was traumatic for her to hear that, because no parent wants to hear that from their daughter, like, or their son, but no parent, like, you really don't want to hear that. And it was something that I had to remedy. And I remember standing in my bathroom in my hotel, and I was like, okay, my unconscious mind, I know it's bringing this to the surface for some reason. And it was at the time where I was there, and I was like, holy shit, Kim. I put myself in this dangerous position at a party, got drunk, slept with a guy, and then he wanted to have sex in a different way. Just to give you some context, he wanted to have sex in a way that I don't have sex. And he tried to do it anyways. And I had said no, and then he tried to do it anyways again. And I looked at that experience, and I was like, holy crap, I thought I deserved it. Because this was about 6 months after my divorce from my ex was finalized. Because when I was 22, I did something young and silly and romantic. And I ran off with this Navy guy, and I ended up really, really breaking his heart and hurting him. And because he had never wanted a divorce. He didn't want to leave me. He didn't want to divorce me, but it was just a very, very, abusive relationship, that just was not, it was my least creative time in the history of my life. And when I had finally gotten the papers that it was finalized in January, and then in like June, I was at this party and had this happen. And I realized that I had not really dealt with my feelings and the things around my self-worth, around why I got into that first marriage in the first place, around the reason that I got into that marriage was from a place of fear. It was from a place of, well, I don't know if I'm going to do any better. It was from a place of, I don't know if this is like going to, like, he's a nice guy. He has a good job. He's never going to cheat on me. He's never going to leave me. And I had all these standards, but they weren't really my list of 50 that I have, that I always wanted for like the perfect person for me, that eventually I found that list that I made when I was 15, and I read them back after I'd been after like 6 months into dating my husband. I was like, oh my God, he has 49 out of 50. But
And the 50th one you can work on, brother. No.
the 50th one didn't really count anyways because it was kind of null and void for both of us. But this experience that I had around deserving, it like last year was really the year of remedying what it is that I truly believe at my core that I deserve. And for those people who in your audience or who are listening to this who have been sexually abused and violated, there is a belief that can form that you deserved it. And that was a limiting belief that had held me back from really going for everything that I desire, more so than any other belief that has really held me back. And I constantly come back to the Wonder Woman quote because what would Wonder Woman do, right?
Right.
I constantly come back to the Wonder Woman quote where she says, it's not about deserve. It's about what you believe. The problem was that for years I'd believed that I deserved to be abused. I deserved to be taken advantage of. I deserved to have my boundaries trampled. I deserved to have all like anything that happened. I had that, and it's not a conscious awareness. I didn't walk around like seeking it consciously, but I would put myself into positions or into partnerships or into relationships that I felt like I deserved to be mistreated in some way on a completely unconscious level. And it was just last September that this belief finally came to the surface. And it was like, this belief was like, I am ready to be healed because I know that this is not the ultimate truth. Like the ultimate truth is that you do deserve the desires of your heart because those desires were placed in your heart before birth. Your gifts are greater than you. That's a quote from John Maxwell. Like your gifts are greater than you. And those gifts and those talents and those desires, they were placed on your heart by the divine, by the creator of the universe in my belief system. And that you are deserving just because you are, not by anything that you do, not by any works. I mean, I was raised in a Christian household, and in the Bible it says it is not by works that you are saved, and it was that connection that all my life I have been striving and been such an achiever, and I've had to do things because I felt like I had to prove to myself that I deserved them. And the thing is that I deserve them just because I am. As are you, just because of the fact that you are. And I do believe that the words I am are the most powerful words in the universe. And so when you use those words, it is like a rocket ship for wherever you want to go or wherever you don't want to go.
My goodness, Kim. I'm number one, I'm so thankful and grateful that you were willing to share that with us, because Alan and I were literally talking before this podcast about the fact that we have a lot of our clients are women, and I can't tell you, basically every single woman I have ever talked to in my entire life has been physically, mentally, emotionally, or sexually abused, and it bothers me to my core being on the other side of that, being a man who would never do such a thing. So I want, if you're listening to this and that's something that you've dealt with, if you feel those things, listen to what Kim just said, because that moved me, and I appreciate the hell out of you for that, Kim.
Absolutely.
That was one of the most powerful moments we've probably ever had on the podcast. I second everything that Kevin just said. Kevin and I both were raised by women, and I do think that has shaped us into, what we once thought was a weakness, not having a strong male role model. We have, I believe, developed into a huge strength. So Anyways, I second what he said about how much that upsets me, and I'm really, really appreciative as well that you went that vulnerable and that you talked about your truth, and then more importantly, what you brought to the listeners who may or may not have been in situations like that. And I think feeling like you deserve a lot is a good place to start for people who maybe aren't ambitious because maybe they don't feel like they deserve it on some level, and I think exploring that is going to be huge. So Kevin has... Oh, go ahead.
And it goes back to what I said at the beginning about your past story. And so the story that you're telling yourself, it'll come up. Like, it'll leave clues as to what your beliefs are. And if you hear yourself telling a story about deserving in any way, that anything less than what you desire, anything less than abundance, than love, than profit, than prosperity, than joy, than happiness, if you're telling yourself any story other than that, really look into what you truly believe that you deserve.
I was on a call with one of our dear friends, Eddie Pinero of Your World Within. He's been on this podcast twice, actually, episode 66, and I'm not sure about the first one, and it probably was terrible anyway, so don't go back and listen to that. But I was talking to him about, I'm sure, Kim, you've probably heard of the cycle of success that Tony Robbins talks about, where in the bottom left-hand corner, there's belief. In the upper left-hand corner, there's potential. In the upper right-hand corner, there's action. And in the bottom right-hand corner, there's result. Now, here's the thing. When you believe in yourself and your own ability to, you desire something, and you believe in your own ability to attain it, you inevitably take action, and then you get a result. The problem is sometimes that result doesn't reinforce the belief. So if you're out there right now and you don't believe that you're capable of great things, go test it. And when you test it, realize that just because you swung the golf club and it went 2 feet doesn't mean you suck at golf. It means you're new. And it's totally fine. Everyone sucks at golf at first. Tiger Woods had a golf club in his hands at 4 years old. That's why he's Tiger Woods. So you're not bad at golf. And that's the thing. I think identity's in the middle of that cycle. And the one thing that I will say that I've always had that I think a lot of other people didn't always have is belief in my own ability to create a brighter future. And so if you're out there and you're wondering why you're not ambitious, it might be time to explore that belief and go and keep testing it. And if the results you get in your life are not reinforcing your belief in yourself, remember that everybody's bad at first, and you know, go back and listen to the episode 10 of this podcast.
Dog shit.
Yeah, we were new. We were new at the time. We thought it was good. Now, in comparison, it was what Kevin just referred
Dog
to
shit.
it as. Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we are running to the end here. We have 2 questions that we ask everybody, and then we will let you plug away where everybody can find you, where they can get coached by you, where they can listen to you. You want to ask your question first, since
Can I say one thing?
Oh, sure.
On that, it's a common misconception that failure is the opposite of success. It's a part of it.
Oh yeah, it's a necessary ingredient.
It's a part of it. It's a step to it.
Right.
And with each failure, it's just another step as long as you are learning from those mistakes. And that's why, to circle back to the vacuum law of prosperity, when you learn from that mistake and then you forgive yourself for that mistake, forgiveness is the superpower that creates that vacuum for something new to flow in.
Oh, that's powerful. For sure. My goodness. I have 3 pages of notes, Ken. I have literally three full pages. Like, seriously. Yep, 3 full pages, which I think is a PR, by the way. I think that's a personal
Well done.
best.
Strong work.
Oh, wow. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4
You
pages.
can't even count.
Yeah, 4 pages of notes. I can't even count. So the question that I ask every guest, and if you've done your research, you may or may not have seen this coming. I wear a North Star around my neck. It's the true north. It's the brightest star in the sky. It's unwavering. It's constant. It's a guide. And I believe that when we're in our darkest emotional pain, we can either escape into a vice or develop a virtue. And I think we've all been on either end of that spectrum. Clearly, all 3 of us have. Now, I believe there's something, and you already kind of alluded to this a little bit when you said that desire, true, authentic, genuine desire of the heart, is something that you said you're born with. So it's something that has always been there. So my question for you is, we change, we evolve, we grow. You're growth-oriented. Clearly, you've evolved so much, trial and error. What about you never changed?
The fact that I wanted to be a princess, and so I built it into my company. I bedazzled and put a crown on personal development.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, I
That's
love
a very,
that.
very honest answer. Hell yeah.
And it makes sense too. It's I think if it's real to you, then you make it into your reality, and you clearly are. Your podcast is called The Princess and the Bee, so it makes sense.
Right.
My question for you, and that I have been lucky enough to ask almost every guest we've had on here, when I realized why I was on this earth, when I realized what my purpose was, when I realized what I wanted to accomplish before I died, that really helped guide me, and that made me a better human. What do you hope to accomplish with your time here before you leave Earth behind?
I do not think there's enough time in this program to be able to go into everything that I desire to accomplish.
Give us one.
The big overarching one.
Well, for me,
Your question got her to contemplate.
Right, we're gonna
more.
have to do a round two, and that's gonna be the
You're
first
gonna-
question.
like that's definitely. I mean, that's like because there is like the big one. I mean, I really truly. There's a couple. So I love supporting female entrepreneurs, and overarching goal is to eventually bring that into children entrepreneurs and teaching them that the more entrepreneurial mindset of creativity and freedom and how to build ease into the business, and how like all these old paradigms and old beliefs that we've had about how work quote unquote should be, to really challenge those within kids so that they have more freedom to be able to create whatever it is that they want to create in the world. And then another part of that would be also to have a space. This vision literally came to me only about 5 months ago when I was journaling out 7 pages of like what I truly desired to create in my world. And another part of that is to create a space for children who have been told that they may have certain limitations, and to knock down those fucking plagiarized beliefs by people who do not know the power of human spirit.
I love that. I think so. I will have a charity called Kevin's Kids, and I would love to work with you hand in hand, because that's something that I never thought I was intelligent. I never thought I was capable. I thought I had to work a job I didn't like for my entire life. I did it for 29 years, and then I realized one day that, oh, okay, this isn't how it has to be. So I want to have a charity to help children as well and help them do what they really want to do and what they're really passionate about. So I resonate very highly with that.
Yep. And I mean, for me, I mean, it all goes back to my son, but it also goes back to like what I was taught. Like I was raised, while flawed parents, like they still were always incredibly supportive of me going for my dreams. And the more I've worked with people, the more I found out that some people were not so blessed. And some people were told that whether it was by parents or by school teachers or by doctors, that they would have certain quote unquote incapacities or dysfunctions or disorders that prevented them really from using those things as an asset and then going for it. Because I think that limitations can only be your limitations for as long as you allow them to be. But if you allow those things to be the things that you overcome, like Jim Quick, someone that I admire so much, was called the boy with the broken brain when he was a kid, and yet he's one of the most brilliant minds on how to enhance mental capacity and performance. And it's like when you see those things that when you were a child, I think that's where really your superpowers lie. I mean, one of the things when I was a child, it's why I'm my superpower as a coach is to challenge people lovingly to rise to their highest and best, was because I got in trouble all the time from my dad challenging him when he would come home drunk, or when he would lash out and be just boorish, or when he would have certain behavior that I was like, you are better than that. And I knew it at my core, and I knew it because like it's freaking namaste, the divine in me sees the divine in you. And so I was like, I know your behavior is not your best. And I do believe people are not their behaviors, but their behaviors are results of the conditioning and the programming that they've had from past experiences, memories, values, beliefs, all that past conditioning. And you can change your behavior by just starting to work backward through those beliefs, seeing if the values are really the ones that you want to have, or if there's some that are, as I say, we're plagiarized. Like all limiting beliefs are all plagiarized from somebody else who felt they had their own limitations.
So Kim, say somebody wants to, hypothetically change their behavior and they want to do it with you. Where can they find you? Where can they listen to you? What's your website? What's your Instagram? I'm going to link all of it anyway, but it helps to say it and so people can hear it. Plug everything you have.
Everything. Oh my goodness. So many things. So if you would like to work with me privately, one-on-one, to really like go to town on your unconscious mind and reprogram those limiting beliefs and take you to a whole new level of clarity, of excellence, of energy, of productivity, of performance, of courage, then you can apply for a breakthrough call at crownyourself.com / I think it literally is breakthrough-call.
Very original. I like it.
Yeah, I know. Super OG. And if you are an entrepreneur and you really desire to grow your business and you're not yet making $35,000 a year in your business, and you're looking to either just start, or you want to develop your programs, or you want to develop your brand, then check out my program, my membership program, The Princess Process. It's at crownyourself.com / The Princess Process. It's all about taking you from the mindset of the princess into being the queen bee of your business, because every princess has a mentor and counsel who is supporting her on her rise to rule. And I want to give you that. And my self-study programs and all of those courses that I have, they're also on my website at crownyourself.com / shop. And if you want to just hear more from me, you can always go to The Princess and the Bee, subscribe on iTunes, on Spotify, and enjoy my newly birthed podcast that I am so super proud of.
It is great.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm so super proud of it. And we talk all things business, bodies, boys, bank accounts, babies, boldness, belief systems, anything that really starts with a B.
Which Apple was very upset about when you first applied.
Oh boy. Well, yes, Apple did not like my really, really long-winded title that they thought was SEO.
Right.
Oh, they can't stop you though. They don't know who they're dealing with.
Right.
They had no idea who they were dealing with, so I just tweaked the title, and now that all that yummy goodness is in the description, as Apple likes it to be. So yeah, so you can subscribe to my podcast at The Princess and the Bee. I have my high performance coaching program, The Queen's Way, which is opening up this summer. And yeah, crownyourself.com is really where to find all the hub. And my Instagram for inspirational quotes, business motivation, leadership tips, it's at Crown Yourself Now. And then if you want to follow my mompreneur journey and see the day-to-day inside the life of a high-performing mompreneur who is a badass rock star and who does it all in heels. By the way, literally wearing heels for this podcast as I walk around.
Me too. I got mine on as well.
You do?
Yeah, the camera just can't see it, nor will they ever.
Only every other Wednesday, you know?
So that is at my Instagram at Kimberly.Spencer.
So for the listeners, I can definitely vouch for Kim, as can Alan. We are lucky enough to hear her behind the scenes ideas and the things that she's following through on every week on our mastermind call. Her website is next level. Again, when I looked at it, I was like, here we go. I'm fucking up again.
Built it all myself.
You, by the
way.
We were impressed with you before we sat down with you today. Like, we've been blown away with you consistently. I know if you're still listening, you're blown away as well. And I would not say that if I didn't mean it. And I definitely vouch for
Thank
Kim.
you.
You are unbelievably impressive. And I am so grateful and appreciative that you sat down. You went as deep as you did. And I feel like you added a massive amount of value. So I am very thankful to you, Kim.
I'm so thankful for you guys. Like, you two are so amazing. And with what you are doing to raise the level of consciousness and awareness in people is extraordinary. And I love your podcast and the amount of vulnerability. And that's why I felt so safe to be as vulnerable as I was with some of my experiences with you guys.
That means the world to us.
Kim, thank you for saying that. Seriously, I after our last mastermind call, I got off the call and I talked to Kevin. I said, she is so good for us. Like, I'm learning so much,
Absolutely.
which I end up taking the whole mastermind because I just ask you questions like over and over again. Well, what about that? And what about that? Kevin's like, give her a chance to answer. So I tried to do that on this podcast. But again, you had the courage to ask us to come on the show. I'm so glad that you did. For the listeners out there, have the courage to ask and take action on what you want. That's what kept jumping off the page. I've got 4 pages of notes here. Kim, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Kimberly Spencer, and we will talk to you later.
Talk to you soon.
Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed our latest episode where Alan and I were lucky enough to interview Kimberly Spencer. Up next, we have a small talks episode where we talk all about the word excuses.
So if your reasons for taking action are not big enough, your excuses will be. We're going to go deep on this word and make sure that you're not making excuses in your life that are holding you back from achieving your dreams.
I think naturally we all tend to make excuses. Maybe it's too early, maybe it's too cold, whatever it is. We're going to try to help you break down your excuses into tangible actions.
Talk to you soon.
Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for listening to another episode of the Hyper Conscious Podcast.
Going hyper-conscious will absolutely change your life because if you understand why something is the way it is, now you have the power to change it. If you going hyper-conscious with us has changed your life in any way, please share this episode with one of your friends because the more people that go hyper-conscious, the better this world's going to be for everybody.
And if you would kindly leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, that would help us make more people hyper-conscious, and we would be greatly appreciative.
Thank you.
Bye.